Welcome back, everybody. It's Rodrigo with another episode here for Asheville Real Estate News. Really excited about the episode we're bringing to you today. It is with Tony Pierfelice. He's been on the podcast before and kind of wanted to have him back on to just talk a little bit about everything. I always really appreciate his perspective, and I know he's thinking of things in a really good, critical manner. And so we wanted to just talk about real estate, business, COVID, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen, and just have a wide-ranging conversation on some kind of more macro topics. And hopefully you found it helpful and you can kind of get some applications or, figure out how to apply it to your own life or business. As always, really appreciate you guys tuning in. See you all in the next one, and please share, review, and talk to you guys soon. Take care. Tony, welcome back to the show. Really excited to have you. I know this one was kind of like a little bit of a long time coming to connect. A lot of moving schedules and everything, and excited to sit down and talk.
Good to be here.
A whole range of things. So
good to see you virtually, at least.
Yeah, absolutely. So last time we talked on the podcast, we talked a little bit about lending and kind of just financial management, and I think that's really interesting to think about what's happened over the last 6 or 8 months, reflecting on that initial conversation about, putting yourself into financially good situations. And I was wondering if you could maybe just touch on that really quickly about what the difference is of, experiencing all these moving pieces and changes, if you feel like you're well protected or well set up to deal with change like what we've seen over the last 6 months, and if anything new has come to the surface, observing everything.
Well, in our greater Asheville area, which is really starting to expand further now, I think.
Agreed.
It used to be, 10 minutes, let's say, from Asheville. I think people now are really looking at, you can get all the way down Transylvania, Haywood,
for sure.
Madison are now looking at that as being Asheville. We've actually seen it's been a benefit in the real estate market. We're getting a huge number of people coming in from out of state. So from a change perspective, I had initial concern as to what was going to happen, and then started seeing that influx. And I think it's been a benefit. I think pricing and real estate's just unbelievable in this area, and I don't think it's sane, but from a lending perspective, as long as you're looking at current valuations and not baking in like people did in 7 and 8, that the inherent assumption that the price is going to go up 10% during the 6-month hold period, I think you're safe. And
yes,
my lending is based upon looking at current and actually leaving some room for some slight adjustment.
Yeah, well, on that note, obviously you work with a lot of different investors doing lending. Have you seen anybody's business models change or pivot, or has kind of everybody continuing to do the same thing and maybe just made some adjustments on, loan to value or valuations?
I've seen everyone pretty much doing the same thing. I've seen some of the people I lend to that were going to do buy and holds with put some minor repairs into it and keep it longer term, or flipping them just because they're getting offers that take the risk out immediately, and make, why hold on to it if you can turn a profit and a reasonable profit and move on to the next one. Properties are getting, it's as a wholesaler, it's very competitive to find the right buy.
I think that's the one thing that always stays the same in any market, right? Like buying right's always going to be important, and I've always found that I forget like where I heard it, but it just says like you make your money when you buy, but you collect it when you sell, or something along those. I think it's like such a good reminder that it's equity doesn't necessarily mean profits necessarily, right? Like you still have to cash out on it or capture it some way, and it's volatile, not to the same degree as other things, but I mean, equity can disappear, as people have found out in the past too. So it's interesting to see. With everything with COVID that's happened in the markets, I know you kind of have a good pulse on a little bit more of a bigger perspective than just real estate. I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts that you'd be willing to share on any. I mean, obviously there's been a lot of changes. How many of these changes are going to be permanent, semi-permanent, or are going to go away soon?
Well, I think one of the most interesting things, and while it's not going to have a direct effect on me, is the work from home.
Yeah.
Is, companies were reticent to allow that. And from my perspective, it's really a management issue. You have to have stronger managers to manage people remotely. And I don't think companies were comfortable being proactive in doing that. But now we're seeing that since they were forced to do it, many companies have realized that even their stronger managers can manage this process. It's a little more stressful, I think, for people, both the people working from home and the managers, but we're seeing it be successful. And I think the commercial market is just going to be, totally disrupted. We're seeing it already. We're seeing it, in California, some of the tech companies are, strong proponents of work from home. They've always had some aspect of that. Mm-hmm. But they're even going so far as changing compensation structures. So if you're a couple of the tech companies in the Bay Area, if you choose to elect to work from home and relocate from the area, which they're supportive of and allowing you, they're adjusting comp levels because they're saying, look, we paid you a premium comp to locate down the street from us, but you move from an area with 1.3 times this standard cost of living to an area with one, we're going to adjust your comp.
Well, that makes sense. So they're matching the salaries based on, give or take, what's the comparable standard of living wherever the employees are moving?
Yes. But the commercial markets that are just, it's taking a lot of the pressure off. New York City's taking a lot of the pressure off. I don't think we fully understand, at least I don't, what the long-term effect's going to be, but I think it's going to be a decrease in valuations on the commercial side.
Yeah. So talking about those long-term effects, I think it is tough because, do we even really know what the short-term effects are? I think that one thing that I've struggled with really having a good feel for what's going on is also recognizing that there's a lot of, the government's propping up a lot of what's happening. And so it's hard to know is it real? Is it a mirage? Like, do we even know how bad or how good it is? What do you think?
I don't think we have any idea.
Yeah.
As you said, the government's propping things up. The unemployment's running out. But I guess they're talking about another extension. But these things are all relatively short term. If you look at the underlying thing, bankruptcies are up. Small businesses are going under. Large businesses, gyms. I don't think there's a national gym chain out there that did not file bankruptcy. A lot of those types of businesses, some of them are going to come back, some of them won't. But, if you look at gyms, what's going to be the effect? The gyms will probably be in operation, but they're going to renegotiate their leases, and it's going to be the landowners, again, that are going to feel the brunt of the impact. So I think a lot of this is passing down to the real estate owners. If you look at the eviction moratorium, who is that affecting? It's affecting the owner.
Yeah, we've had a couple of conversations about that. It's tough. There's no right solution, and I think there's a lot of unintended consequences, especially on that are playing out. Talking personal experience there and with other people I've talked to.
Yeah, and but then you're not seeing the foreclosures right now because the courts. It's not that there's a formal, cease and desist on foreclosures. It's just that the courts aren't in operation.
Yeah. So
you're not, the banks have trouble or the lenders have trouble getting in to effect a foreclosure. So I think it's sort of I don't know. You can't really tell, but when we get the vaccine, let's say that's the solution, and that ends up being the solution, and things normalize to whatever the new normal is, all these effects are going to sort of come rushing through.
So historically speaking, has there ever been this much like government intervention at the local, like small individual level? Like I know, like obviously in other situations, like in '08 or things like that, like, the government came in and bailed out like bigger businesses, but things with like the PPP loans and the EIDL loans and things like that, I mean, that went down at a really granular level. Is that going to be like ripping the Band-Aid off when those things start getting, come due, or how do you foresee that playing? Because it's a little different when it's like the mom and pop shops, small business owners versus the, big companies, right?
Yeah, well, I don't see they had surplus money on the PPP and the EIDL loans.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like those programs ending is going to be a problem. They've really relaxed the standards for getting forgiveness on the PPP.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if you're pretty much still in business and you can put together a couple sentences, you're going to be able to get forgiveness on the PPP. And the repayment plan on the EIDL is so benevolent.
Yeah.
It's not going to be like when those payments start in 18 months or whatever now.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a problem. So I think those programs direct or benefit and aren't going to be an issue. The most, talking about getting down to the individual, it was that, extra $600 a week
Unemployment.
on unemployment that went not just to those with W-2 income, but those with 1099 income. The disruption was it was giving some people more money than working. So you had small businesses that were even still having a challenge hiring,
right?
Because they couldn't meet that new wage level.
Mm-hmm.
And when that ends, if you look at what's happening in the retail market, people didn't take that money and save it and hunker down with it. They took that money and went out and spent it on, you can't find a bike right now. You can't find bike parts. All sorts of things.
Yeah, consumer goods just disappeared.
Went out the door.
Yeah.
So that's going to have a twofold effect. When that money stops, I think the retail, consumer goods is going to go down again. I don't think it's going to crash, but it's
Mm-hmm.
going to, plateau more normal. And I think once again, we get back to some of the basics. These people are going to be in trouble. And I don't see that there's not a program that's going to fix it.
Yeah. So talking Asheville, I mean, obviously Asheville has a very unique economy, or maybe it's not unique and it's just like a normal touristic based economy. It's right now, I think most people would agree that tourism here is still going, all things considered, very strong. In my mind, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Like if you can't travel, you're going to drive somewhere, and you're going to drive somewhere that's beautiful. And like Asheville is very centrally located to so many bigger metropolitan areas. Like I don't see that changing anytime in the near future. Do you anticipate that, or what do you think?
I don't think it's going to be a huge change. I think it's going to, once again, I think the pendulum has sort of swung over. We've got people doing knee-jerk reactions. People from the cities, et cetera, that are just like, okay, I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go to Asheville.
Yeah. I'm not meaning moving, like just like the weekend tourists who are like, oh, let's get away for a couple of days. Like that. I don't think that's going to change, right? Like
no, I don't think
they're going to come here, right? Yeah.
That's going to change at all. I was out at Biltmore last week, and I mean, it was packed.
Mm-hmm.
Most people without masks, but it was packed. And it was just, I was surprised, and it was not just a lot of the foreign languages being
Mm-hmm.
spoken. So I was trying to figure out, I pretty much thought the international travel was shut down. So I was a little surprised at that. But I think everything that Asheville has to offer, I think one of the biggest things we have to offer that people are coming here for is the outdoors. You've got people that don't, like the people that go to Biltmore without a mask.
Yeah.
But then you've got the people that are a little more concerned that are coming down here and are not going, to the restaurants, the breweries, but are coming down here, going out in the woods,
Mm-hmm.
hiking, camping, biking.
Yeah, they're looking for that space.
Mm-hmm.
With all the people coming in, like Asheville's always had this tenuous relationships with short-term rentals and Airbnbs. Do you think some of those policies might kind of backfire a little bit? Like, obviously, I'm sure, I don't know. For me, I'd definitely prefer to stay in an Airbnb versus a hotel if I was making that decision. And I think it'd behoove, the economy locally to have people keep coming in and putting money into it, et cetera. Are we going to have like lack of capacity, or do you think it will level out?
I'm not sure the city is going to change its policies.
Right. I agree. I'm not saying that they would change. I'm just wondering if it's going to like create a little bit of a constraint where there wasn't one because of all the hotels.
I think it's already changed. It's the people that I know with the short-term rentals, and I'm in one of the CREA groups, the short-term rental group, and they've been talking like after March, they've just been like, high 90% occupancy.
Wow.
Even with the recent spike, they've had a lot of cancellations around Christmas because of the new guidelines on trying not to travel over the holidays. But they're saying as soon as they get a cancellation, they're filling it fairly rapidly right after that. And they've actually increased the price for those special holidays.
Yeah.
So I think people want, to come down and get to an Airbnb because they don't have to go through the hotel lobby. They can prepare their own foods, so they can somewhat quarantine and still enjoy some of the environment around here.
Yeah, that makes sense. So all of that said, I think personally, I've been feeling like, obviously in the real estate market, that unknown to reasons to me, like I still think it's going to be a strong market in the spring, even if things can change nationally in a different way. For like a lot of the things we just talked about, like people are always still going to want to come here at the end of the day. And it seems, relatively speaking, that a lot of the housing prices here feel really expensive to people who live here. But if you're coming from either, from bigger cities, like the housing prices here are going to feel a lot more normal. I think that we're going to continue to see that strong market, even though that surprises me to say that out loud, I guess. Have you any opinion on that? Like,
I think in short term, going back to the conversation about what happens when everything ends.
Yeah.
In the end isn't the spring. The end is several months after all this support stops. Congress is looking at a proposal now continuing, not at 600 a week, but 300 a week through at least the first quarter. And so even after that ends, it takes three to 4 months for things to sort of trickle down. So I think the real estate market's going to stay strong, at least, through the first half of next year. We've continued to have people wanting to come into the market, and they're bidding up. The supply side is, I think the second half we'll see a lot of changes. I think we're going to see people that have bought down here that will suddenly realize, the city people that, they really don't want to be in the country.
Yeah, they miss the city.
Yeah, there was a reason they were in the city in the first place, and they want a city. And, and that's even if they're in Asheville itself, because it just doesn't, Asheville to New York City is not a comparison.
Yeah. I mean, when I moved here from Bogota, I was like, oh, this is such a quaint little town.
Yes.
So no, it's, I think, if you grew up in a big city or you're coming from it, like, I think for me, I've learned to enjoy it and appreciate for what it was. But when I first came here, I was like, this place is so small. There's nothing here. There's, obviously it was a little different. It was 2010-ish. So a lot's changed since then. Going back to the foreclosure conversation, when do you think that that's going to change? Because I know that's one of the things we've done personally is kind of just waiting for there to be more conversations with people who are wanting to sell, that's a trigger point, and it's pretty much been non-existent. I thought it was going to happen this fall. It hasn't. Like, I know it's going to happen, and it's not, or maybe it doesn't. And like, I mean, I guess best case scenario is that it doesn't happen, but it just seems like, I'm just wondering how long this can drag out before, the other shoe drops per se. How do you measure that?
Well, if you go back to the eviction, if you can't evict somebody, you can't put someone in that's paying rent. So you've got someone not paying rent, even though they're tightening it up, and now you have to, say you have a real hardship and sort of, you don't even have to prove it though. You just have to sign a piece of paper that says that. So it's sort of self-certifying, which, doesn't work.
Yeah.
So that's going to continue to build. And until you start allowing evictions, that's going to put a continued pressure on these smaller landlords. You have the courts not opening up on the foreclosures. So that's going to forestall the foreclosure market. And you've got some banks that are really trying to bend over backwards and help people. But at some point, their patience is going to run thin, or else they're going to have, the Fed's, good, bad, right now, and they did this in 7 and 8. They're telling the banks, give liquidity to the market, cut people slack. And then at some point, the Fed's going to turn around and say, wait a minute, you've got all these bad loans on your books. Shame on you, you've got to tighten that up. And when that happens, I think you're going to see a rush of foreclosures out in the market. I think that's 6 months away probably from what I'm seeing right now happening. And it's going to, I think from a soft side is the government's going to need to feel that the pandemic is over. So that gets back to probably the vaccine.
Wow.
And the vaccine getting out to the public, where the government can say, well, at this point, if you're having a problem, it's your problem. It's not society's problem.
It's not external circumstances. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, that would be interesting. It just seems like if you're having a problem now, things aren't going to get better 6 months from now.
No.
Right. And so it's going to be, if that happens, there's going to be a huge, just like flood of foreclosures and then people going through the, very similar circumstances that are challenging all at the same time. That's if that happens and it's kind of just floodgates open and it's not a gradual release, that would be, that'll be really interesting. I can't imagine that it'll be positive. It's got to compress any market that feels that, right?
You've got this buyer side pressure though. So I think what you're going to see, as a wholesaler, it's like the people with the tax problems, Rodrigo. Mm-hmm. They know it's there. They know it's coming. They know the timeline when the sale's going to be. And how many of them wait until the week of the sale?
I guess that's true. How many conversations we have with people is like, hey, can you buy our house? We're getting foreclosed on in 10 days. It's like 10 days. Maybe we can have this conversation, but man, you're really cutting it close here. I guess there's always that innate human belief of hope, right? Things are going to get better. Something's going to change. That big break's going to happen. But man, that's challenging to bank on that. Well, let's change to something a little bit different, right? So the first conversation we were talking, we had on the podcast, we talked a lot about financial stability and creating, a good solid foundation. We're going through a moment, and I've heard a lot of different podcasts and people talking about hey, this is coming up. It's going to be a great transfer of wealth, very similar to 08, I guess, and probably other downturns in the economic cycles. How have you seen that play itself out in the past, and how are you doing anything different this time versus last time, or how do you measure, not risking it all and losing it all, and also putting things into place to really take advantage of a changing market? I think that was a convoluted question, so I can clarify or whatnot. But
it gets back to there's a lot of change and a lot of opportunity, mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be very difficult and challenged to really understand where the opportunities lie, because we don't understand the impact of all the changes right now. If you go back in 7 and 8, it was pretty clear where assets across the board were devalued, and if you were liquid, it could pick up assets. They went so far down in value, they're going to come back. So it was almost a no-brainer. Mm-hmm. It was just a lot of people weren't liquid.
Right.
So that was the challenge. And I took advantage of some of those dips and had cash and purchased and then sold when they regained. For me right now, I'm further along in my retirement thing, and I'm sort of just sitting on the sidelines. Yeah. I'm pretty much out of the market. And I say that even though, we're setting new records, but I look at it and go, I don't understand it. The underlying, this is not based upon economic data. This is based upon, COVID vaccines and all this soft stuff. And I sleep well at night, and I'm not getting the appreciation. And I'm looking for something that's going to be a little more boring and just, I actually talked to my financial advisor last night, and I was like, I'm not worried about investments that give me appreciation anymore. I want investment strategies to protect me from downside.
But so say you were not in that retirement cycle and you're more like, I don't know, where I am, or somebody comparable to me, where you're still kind of in that building, maintaining stage. You're not ready to kind of kick back. You're still looking for that upside. What would be questions you would be asking yourself as you're considering different moves to make, like to be aggressive but not foolish?
I'd be getting into the data a lot more and really understanding more what's going on in the market. Mm-hmm. And I'm not doing that now, Rodrigo. Yeah. I'd rather go out and ride my bike.
That's always a good thing to do.
And get into the data.
Yeah. What data would you be looking at?
I'd be segmenting the housing market, mm-hmm. The apartment market, and trying to identify which areas are under the most pressure. Mm-hmm. I think the larger players, and when I say that, I don't mean huge conglomerates, but I mean, most of the people that, real estate investors that have some wherewithal, that aren't just onesie twosies, mm-hmm. That are intelligent and have some cash reserves, they're going to do fine. But I think there's a lot of younger people or novice investors that stretch themselves, and they don't have the ability to make a mortgage payment if they miss a couple months of rent income. So getting in and looking as to where that stress really is, establishing relationships with the banks as to try and get into that pre-foreclosure opportunities. Because the way the values are, I think a lot of these people can still get out of their loans. I don't think we're going to see a lot of short sales.
Yeah, they'll either sell on the steps or they'll be able to sell before they get there.
Yes. But I think there's opportunities there. Because a lot of people would just be happy getting out from underneath the mortgage. The bank's going to be happy getting paid.
Yeah, everybody kind of wants the same thing. It's just a matter of the stars align and they can agree on them.
Short sales are problematic. You need multiple decision makers, but if you can do a sale that's not a short sale, you can affect that really fast. Mm-hmm. So I think there's opportunities in there. There's going to be opportunities in small multifamily. Once again, people that only, they don't have multiple properties, just have one or two properties, maybe, 5 to 12 doors. Mm-hmm. Once again, that were, living, spending everything they were getting and don't have a wherewithal. They're, you get 10, 20% non-payment, and that, you're underwater real fast.
Yeah, it's I think sometimes, on the outside looking in, like rentals, obviously I think they're a great decision, but it takes a while to not live on razor thin margins, or at least in my experience. Like it takes one door. I mean, if you're looking at $200 a month, like $200 a month is not a lot of wiggle space. And right. So you kind of need to get past that critical mass point where, you can have 3 doors not make a payment and everything else kind of can overcompensate it. And it's, it's thinner than sometimes it's made out to be, I think. Mm-hmm. With those data points, I mean, where have you historically gone to look at us? So somebody's listening, they're like, man, I never look at the data. Where does somebody start?
Well, I should probably data point it's more conversations, more soft stuff.
So you're just more like talking to operators, agents, people.
Talking to operators. Yeah. I used to have a lot of relationships with banks. Mm-hmm. I used to be able to talk to them. There's a lot of data from the banking side of things, either both the savings and loan associations from the bank, from the feds. So if you really want to slice and dice it, you can pull up that data from their websites as to what's going on. And, they're stress testing things anymore since 7 and 8.
Mm-hmm.
So you can delve down and, see what they think's going to happen.
But the data, it sounds more, it's not so much like looking at spreadsheets. It's more about having like consistent and intentional conversations with people. So if you hear like the same thing from 3 different people, you're like, oh, okay, like that's not an outlier anymore.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, I think, I think that's definitely a good thing. Like one of the things that I personally did as COVID started, I got back into a mastermind and at a national level. And that was one of the main reasons, is to hear what other people are seeing and experiencing in a lot of different markets across the board. Kind of hoping that Asheville, being a smaller market, will be lagging behind the bigger markets on whatever people are seeing in the bigger markets. So, and it's been great just having those conversations. Anything else on that as far as caution versus opportunity? I don't want to move on too quickly, but I feel like we hit it pretty clearly, but.
No, it's as much information as you can gather right now is important, because nobody really knows how this is going to shake out.
Yeah.
It's just a massive change, like you've identified before. We've never had the government intervene at this level before. Mm-hmm. The effects on the various businesses, it's like, online orders. It's just it's an interesting thing to sit back and watch.
Yeah, agreed. I wanted to pivot, and maybe we could kind of wrap things up on this conversation. And I don't know if the right kind of subheader for it would be like lifestyle business, but maybe, like, I know for me, COVID has really challenged a lot of my preconceptions on what was normal and how to operate things and like how to do things. So I was hoping you could maybe not so much touch base on that, but just talk about how moments of change like this can be good opportunities to create like congruency in lifestyle, right? Like I know one thing I've always enjoyed talking with you is, you've kind of been able to structure that. You get to do both things that you want to do, right? A lot of play and business kind of are congruent. And so maybe we can talk about how to take steps to get closer to that. And I think this is a good time to put some of those things in motion. And maybe it's not, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, for one thing, you've only known me since I've had a more balanced life. So,
well, but still, it's definitely made an impact, in a positive one, right? Like, it's like, obviously you can't, maybe you can't, but I know it's hard to get there out of the gate day one, but I'm sure there's building blocks or steps to take to start, moving the needle in that direction.
Yes.
Or maybe not. I don't know.
I wish I'd moved the needle a lot earlier in my life, to be honest.
Well, do you mind starting with that then?
Okay.
With that, just overview, it doesn't have to be super specific, but.
Well, I had a plan, and then, I'd reach my plan, and I would increase my spending. Mm-hmm. So my plan would change. And in hindsight, I wish I would have sort of stuck with my original plan and my determination of what my needs were, mm-hmm. versus my wants. And because I've sort of come full circle, and now I've reduced my wants and back to my needs. So I could have done this 10 years earlier and had a much more enjoyable life and played a lot more. So I think really understanding needs and wants and not getting caught up in things, not overextending yourself, is the key. It provides you a lot more flexibility, mm-hmm. With what's going on. As you talk about the challenges, if you have a hiccup, you don't need stress about it as much. You can come out the other side. So I think that's a positive thing. The work from home, that was one thing that I always did is, I had property down here in this area out on Lake James. Mm-hmm. And even though when I was working, I'd be down here working on the lake. So it was always nice to have that flexibility, but I sort of had to hide it. I structured things so people really never knew where I was. And I
always talked with a white background.
Yes. I didn't, my view was sitting at my desk looking out over the lake, and no one ever saw that.
Right.
And I was careful not to mention it. I was careful to act, elusive. I could drop everything and fly any place I needed to be if that came up. So I never acted like that was a problem. I never billed people for that.
Right.
So, I was working out of Michigan, and if I had a meeting down the road that I had to attend, people didn't know that I flew back from North Carolina for the meeting and then came back.
Right. It was just lifestyle. Well, sounds like, even though maybe you didn't make the change as early as you wanted, you definitely had some pretty big components around it though, right? That's a great example. Like maybe you were still working, but you at least were choosing where to work. And
I was choosing where to work, and I was absorbing some of, like I said, the travel, the costs, recognizing there was a cost, not impacting my client base for my choice of that lifestyle.
Right. Through all of the changes that we've had this year, let me rephrase the question. I'll back up. As somebody's considering, anybody's listening, how to get more congruency in that, what do you think are what are the first steps or first questions to ask yourself to try to tease that out and see if because I know for personally speaking, sometimes it's fun to do the things that we do from a business standpoint, and that's true. But then sometimes that fun creates a lot of excess work by accident. And so you get caught into this, I love putting deals together. And then you put a deal together and it might have, X amount of work associated with it. And you kind of, I don't know, for me, it's oh yeah, that's true. That's part of it as well. And I don't know, does that make sense kind of what I'm asking or how did?
I think it does. I think it's, you need to identify what your core competencies are. And I'm assuming from what you're just talking about, you enjoy the core competencies, but what's that ancillary stuff that's associated with that, and what part of that can you spin off? I've always had administrative support, and one of the things that I wish when I was very active in business I could have done, I love that concept of the overseas support.
Virtual assistant, yeah.
And especially, in the business I was doing, there was time sensitive. There were things that if I could have established a relationship, it would have been nice to go to sleep at night, work on what I was working on, get it to the point where it was a routine or something that I could have instructed somebody to do, pass it off, wake up in the morning and be 8 hours ahead.
Yeah.
So I think you need to look and, what can you offload? Because your value, your value isn't doing the deal. That's your value. It's not in doing all that ancillary stuff. So recognizing that, and that's what you enjoy, and getting someone to do the ancillary stuff, it both frees you up doing the stuff you don't like as much. And if you can leverage that, you can do more deals, which is the stuff you do like. Yeah.
That's super. Yeah. Good insight. And it's always helpful to hear all these good reminders. Well, Tony, thanks, so much for coming on the show. And I'll, before we sign off or anything, I was just wondering if there's anything business or otherwise related that you're kind of looking forward to, you're excited about over the next couple of months, couple of weeks, days, etc.
I'm really a little depressed I can't get out of the country. So I'm just starting to look at, if this doesn't clear up with this vaccine, how am I going to do that, or where am I going to go? And
I know Colombia is open to a degree, so just I'll put that. I know Colombia is open to a degree.
Oh, okay.
So,
but then there's that, getting into it's different.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm really doing is I'm anticipating. I bought a little teardrop trailer 2 years ago. I've been using it a lot.
I bet, yeah.
And, I see myself heading out west for an extended trip this spring. And I'm really looking forward to that.
No
Always
doubt.
wanted to see more in the States. There's a lot, I like traveling internationally, but there's still a lot here I haven't seen, and this is a great country.
Yeah, no, we definitely live in a really fun country to explore as well. And going, internationally is always good, but as you said, there's so much good here. Even just locally, it's always such a reminder. It's oh, that's only 4 hours away. Okay, great. So, well, Tony, thank you so much. Do you have, if somebody has questions or wanted to connect with you or anything like that, do you have any contact information that would make sense to share, or are you not taking requests?
Well, no, they can always, my email is arp313@aol.com.
Okay.
Give me an email, and I'm always interested to talk to especially younger people and give them some advice.
Keep the pulse on the market, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Tony, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you all so much for tuning in. As always, it means the world to us if you're willing to share, review the podcast, share with a friend, and we'll catch you all in the next one. Take care.
Thanks a lot, Reverend Go.
Mm-hmm.